Hi everybody, Mark Montgomery here with more great college advice, and today we're going to talk about advanced placement versus the International Baccalaureate. Which one is better for preparing for college admissions? So the first thing we're going to do is just start off with what are these things? What is advanced placement? Well, it is a set of courses that lead to examinations in 39 different subjects, and they purport to be college level. The college board that organizes these courses presents these as college level courses. Now this is really hotly debated and lots of controversy about this, but this is the idea that we're presenting college level work in a high school setting. The truth is that the courses from the AP generally are pretty rigorous, that they push students through material relatively quickly and at a high level, and the College Board, which gets 50% of its revenue from the advanced placement exams, actually is the controller of this. This is the same people that put together the dreaded SAT tests. The thing to keep in mind with this is that the scores or the results on the examinations are normed nationwide. For each of the subjects, sometime in late June, usually, the College Board assembles groups of teachers in different locations around the country, one for each of the subjects, one for each of these tests, and they put these teachers around tables of 8, and they score every single one of these exams by hand. And they teach the teachers how to score them, and they are focusing on ensuring that the scoring is equivalent no matter whether the student is coming from Hawaii, from Florida, whether the student's in a public school setting, in a private school setting. So the idea is that these are normed across the country. They're normed on a scale of 1 to 5. Usually a 3 is considered passing the exam, and for earning advanced credit at a college or university, usually a student needs to score a 4 or a 5. Sometimes a 3 will do, but generally a 4 or 5. And again, colleges will either offer actual credit for completion of these courses with the exam, or at least they will invite students to have advanced standing so they don't have to take the introductory level microeconomics or macroeconomics courses in college. They can move right ahead into higher level classes. So that's advanced placement in a nutshell. 39 different subjects, and it's a whole range of things in every academic field. The International Baccalaureate, however, is a curriculum. Very different. It was created in early 20th century Europe. It was created because students who were moving around Europe, maybe they were sons and daughters, mostly sons at that time, sons of diplomats, and they were going to be educated outside their home country. Well, they had to take an exam when they went back home, and generally they were not going to be prepared for the exams in their home country. So this was created as a kind of a bridge between primarily the British, French, and German educational systems so that students could move about and still be prepared to go to university in their home country. So it's a European, really, it is a European model. It's a curriculum. Students must take 6 subjects plus a bunch of other requirements. I won't get into those in detail, but the 6 different subjects, 6 different academic subjects, and these are normed, just like the AP, against a 7-point scale. Remember, AP is 5 points, this is 7 points. It doesn't really matter, you can't compare the two, but generally a 6 or a 7 is an A in the United States, a score of a 5 is a B, a 4 is a C. So, and a 7 is like an A+. 6 is a good solid A. And again, these are normed by groups of teachers that are pulled together throughout the International Baccalaureate universe, which is global. And students are then scored against a norm, an expectation. This 2-year program, it is really only, the diploma program is only the last 2 years of secondary school. This is the bread and butter of the IB, that diploma program. Now, there are pre-IB programs, there are middle school programs, there's a primary years program. That's all important and interesting, but really for the International Baccalaureate as a curriculum, it's only the final 2 years for this diploma. It has spread like wildfire across the United States in the last 30 years. There are so many more IB schools. I mean, when I was first starting out as an educator, there was only one IB school in the entire Denver metropolitan area. Now there are lots and lots of them. So, and internationally, of course, a lot of international schools offer the International Baccalaureate curriculum to their students. Why are these programs popular? Well, in the United States, the problem here is that we do not have a national educational system. We have 50 different states. We have 14,000 different school districts. We have, I forget, it's around 1,500 to 2,000 private secondary schools in the United States. And then we have all of the homeschooling kids. I mean, we don't have any system that compares one student against. We don't have a system of national examinations. So it's impossible to compare curricula from one school to the next, from one state to the next. The other thing is we cannot compare the course rigor between one state or one school and the next state or school. We cannot compare a GPA or the actual performance of a student here in this context and judge them against a completely different context. So the reason that these have taken off is because they're normed systems, right? We have expectations. If you want to get a 5 on the AP exam in psychology, well, you need to hit this benchmark. So I know that a 5 in Hawaii is the same as a 5 in a public school in Florida or an independent school in Illinois. So we know that a 5 is a 5 is a 5 is a 5. Same thing with International Baccalaureate. If we got a 7 here in China, we got a 7 in the UK, we got a 7 in Hoboken, New Jersey. So this is why we have these, because we as Americans have decided that, for a variety of historical and political reasons, we do not have, nor do we seem to want, a national educational system. So we have purchased these programs from private entities, the International Baccalaureate Organization and the College Board. We have purchased these and we have implemented them in our schools, effectively giving us a national system. Okay, so I think it's always funny when I talk to people who are vehemently against having any sort of a standardized system across the country, but their kids are in AP or IB programs because we need standards. That's kind of the irony in the United States. We don't want standards, and yet we seek them out for our children anytime we can. Little interesting piece. So what are the basic differences between these two curricula? Well, you can think of it like a French menu. We have some prefix where you pick one from each category. The appetizers, the entrees, the desserts, pick one from each. And that's what you get for a set price. A la carte, we got a whole bunch of different things. And you can have a little bit of salad, you can have a soup, you can have a main course, you can have a vegetable, you can have a fruit cup. It's whatever you want, and then you're tallied up at the end. So taking the IB, you have 6 different categories, and you must pick one course from each of the 6 categories. You must then do some extra things. You must take what they call TOK, or Theory of Knowledge. It's kind of an epistemology kind of course about learning and thinking about the idea of how we learn. Kind of a philosophical class. It's very cool. I really like it. And then they have to also do what they call the extended essay, which is an independent research project. They have to do some CAS hours, which is basically be involved in extracurricular activities. I can tell you a lot more about how that evolved and how crazy it's become in most schools, but the idea is for students to do things outside of just their curriculum. In order to get the diploma for the IB, you must take the examination and pass it in each of the 6 subjects. Plus, you can get 3 extra points on the IB diploma. So a perfect score on the IB diploma is 45. Academically, it's a 42 because you have 6 subjects, 7 points in each subject. That is the perfect score. AP, a la carte. Choose what you want, what you like best, what you perform well in. and avoid those courses that you really don't like so much. You present to admissions only the exams that you take, and you don't get a diploma. Now you can get a recognition that if you take a certain number of courses that you're kind of an AP scholar of different levels, but that doesn't really matter so much. What matters is you can take the number of AP exams you wish. You can take only one, or some students will take 13, 14, 15 different AP courses during their secondary school career. So very different structures, very different origins, but really if you keep this menu analogy in mind, it helps. Which is better? Well, neither's really better for college admissions. Both are great. Both are highly respected, and the nice thing is, again, you can norm the scores that your student receives are normed. So we know that a 5 here is a 5 there. No matter what schools you went to or how good the teacher was, if you get a 5, you get a 5, and it's awesome. So same thing with an IB. It doesn't really matter where you got the IB diploma from. If you have that IB diploma and you scored, a 42 or a 45 on that exam, wow, you're rocking it. So it really doesn't matter for admissions. They know of these programs, they're very highly respected, and they know how to compare one student against another in that program. Different students may perform better in one or the other. So, generally speaking, when I'm talking to a family about which is better, I want to get to know the student better. I want to understand what kind of environment they're going to succeed in, that they're really going to excel, that they're going to feel most comfortable in. Because again, what is being judged at the end of the secondary school is how well you did. So if there is a program, one of these prefix versus a la carte programs, that will be better for the student, well, that's the one we choose. Assuming, of course, that your student has a choice. It may be that you only have one choice, depending on where you live, your circumstances, the school you're attending. You may not have both. It may be AP or honors level courses or more regular college prep courses. In that case, that's a different story. Same thing with IB. Your school may not offer AP courses. You may be in a school that offers the IB as the really super high level track at your school. So if you don't have the choice, don't worry about it. If you do have the choice, think about which program would be better and more comfortable for your student. Prefix, a la carte. Again, a few more differences that are helpful in helping to make this decision for students. Remind ourselves that the IB has more requirements for the diploma. It's really an all or nothing thing. You can, in many schools, take an IB course or two and then not get the diploma. And that would be fine if that's what your school offers and you don't have a choice. Then yeah, do that. If there's you can treat it more like the IB if your school allows this. Take the courses in the IB program that are super challenging, that the student really likes, where they can excel, and maybe they're not so strong in another area. They don't have to do the entire diploma program. But if you're really going for the IB for you're going to go for the gusto, well then you really want to think of it as I'm going for the diploma in its entirety. The other thing about the IB is that there are really few choices of courses, and in some schools where the IB program is relatively small, you may have only one or two choices. So for example, in math, you've got three choices. Math at the higher level, math at the standard level, or math studies, which is the lowest level. 3 math, A, B, or C, pick one. Same thing with social studies. Depending on how many students are in the diploma program, maybe they're only offering economics and history. And the history is only one kind of history. It is a predominantly world history, basically relatively contemporary, within the last century and a half. Doesn't go back to ancient history. So you have a narrower field of opportunities or courses that you could possibly take if that's what you're planning to do. If you're planning to go for the diploma, you may have fewer choices. The other thing is that the diploma program is pretty intense. It's 6 subjects. And if you're taking some of the hardest subjects, it can be super intense. So a lot of students who are taking the IB have a harder time finding a way to be involved in extracurriculars at a super high level. So for example, if someone is an athlete and is really perhaps going to be a recruitable athlete, doing the IB at the same time can be really tough. Similarly, students who are really great in the fine arts and really want to go to a school with a large range of fine arts, generally speaking, the range of fine arts available, you can only take one. So you can take music, or you can take drama, or you can take studio art. That's about it. And you have to take the same thing for 2 years. So if you're like dabbling in both music and drama, can be difficult in that kind of context. So there is an overlap, there's an impact on extracurriculars for some students. AP, again, students can choose the courses that suit, and in some cases the number of choices will depend on the size of the school. How many AP courses can they actually offer? Generally speaking, a much larger school will offer a lot more of those 39 subjects than the schools that are smaller and just don't have the economies of scale in order to offer all of the subjects. So sometimes you're going to have a lot of choice, sometimes you may have less. And then there's the competition within schools. This is a problem for the number of AP courses completed. So in some schools that offer a lot of APs, students at the very high end will be counting the number of courses. How many did you take? I took 12. Well, I took 13. I took 14. And there's kind of this race for what students took the highest number of AP classes. The pressure can ratchet up in that way because it'll be student against student. The competition in the IB is not so much against each other. The pressure comes from just the incredible workload of the IB curriculum itself. So some schools actually in this country have begun to limit the number of AP courses that a student could take, the number of AP exams that a student can take. I think for some places that's probably pretty healthy, and so that kids don't get involved in this arms race that they have to take more and more and more and more AP exams. There are also differences in the costs of the IB program. The IB itself is very expensive for a school or for a district to administer. They have to pay a subscription fee to the International Baccalaureate office every year, tens of thousands of dollars, and they also have to engage in regular teacher training and participate in the teacher training programs of the International Baccalaureate because they want to make sure that the teachers really have the wherewithal to enable their students to get those high scores, that the teacher is prepared to deliver the curriculum. And they have a system of school certification, and if the school doesn't do what the International Baccalaureate Office worldwide requires, then they can be decertified and lose the program. So it can be really expensive for schools to implement this program. The cost to a family is not so bad. There are generally a charge for the exams, but often schools will find a way to do that. They'll do fundraising. They will find ways to pay for it so that students who have modest means and are unable to pay, maybe it's been covered. But if you do have to pay for it yourself, it's not overwhelming. It can be significant, but not necessarily a barrier to performance. The AP generally does not cost schools much of anything. And so the barrier to entry for a school to add an AP course in this subject or that subject, not so bad, especially if they have a teacher who's willing to teach it. Now, an AP teacher may or may not have the training to deliver that AP course well. And that's something we really want to talk about. Teacher training is encouraged. The College Board wants teachers who are delivering the AP curriculum to have that training, but it's not absolutely required. And in some contexts where resources are limited, a teacher may not get any support, any teacher training about how to ensure that their students get those top level scores. So we'll come back to that in a minute. The exam fees are generally paid by parents, but sometimes there are scholarships available in your district, in your schools, for students who have financial need. But they are a significant cost. I think they're around $65, $70, something like that. The money is not the issue, but there are problems that arise from these programs. The fact is that schools with more resources generally have better teachers and therefore are better able to offer really good IB classes and really good AP classes. So just because a class is AP doesn't mean that the teacher is good. So that's something to be thinking about. And the problem is in under-resourced districts, towns, rural areas that are offering AP classes, their students don't necessarily pass because the teacher is underprepared to deliver that very rigorous curriculum. So I do have a few recommendations about whether you should take the IB or the AP and how to do it. First of all, if you come from a relatively poorly resourced district where there is not the money available for all kinds of curricula, but your district does have the IB program, maybe even if it's a different high school from the one that's your local high school, consider it. Definitely consider it, because the best teachers in the district will be at that school teaching that curriculum because it's hard. The content demands of that curriculum are such that only the best teachers who have that knowledge are going to be able to present that curriculum. So as long as your student either can get into the program, sometimes it's an application program, an application that they must submit to get into the IB, or if your student, you really feel strongly that your student has the capability to perform at a really high level, then seek that curriculum out. It is a great opportunity. As I said, the school must pay the money to make sure that this program is delivered by being a member of the IBO, and they must also invest in their teachers and give them the teacher training. Ship them off to other places in the country to make sure that they understand and can deliver this really rigorous curriculum. So if you don't have any other opportunity but the IB exists, go for it. Put that on your radar screen. The AP is different though, because it really varies wildly. The quality of those courses and the ability to get students to pass the exams varies wildly across the country. Just because it says it's an AP course doesn't mean that your student will have the exposure and the curricular support to pass that exam. So you need to be asking questions. You need to ask questions at your school. What are the pass rates here? What percentage of our students are getting 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s on all of these different AP classes and exams that we offer here? You want to know, just because you offer the AP doesn't mean that anybody's getting a 5. There are some schools that are offering APs that they don't even get anybody to pass. Why is that? That's a problem. Same thing is asking about individual pass rates of individual teachers. So for example, you can have AP psychology and 2 different teachers offering the same subject. One teacher gets most of their students 5s and a few 4s, while the other teacher gets their students a 4 or 2, lots of 3s, and quite a few 2s. Well, just as this normative aspect of these exams tells us a lot about students, it can tell us a lot about teachers too. So if you have the choice, you want your student in the class that can pass those students. So make sure that your AP program is really good and that the teachers are capable of not only presenting the curriculum, but helping ensure that the students in it pass it and get good marks. The sad fact, and this goes back to social inequality in our country, is that wealthier school districts have better pass rates because they are able to buy better teachers. And teachers, because the salaries are higher, they stick with that district. So the sad fact is that the wealthier districts are getting better pass rates. So if that's an issue for your family and your student is not in a classroom, in an AP classroom with high pass rates, but has the capability of passing it, even though the teacher may not be great shakes, then you want to consider tutoring. And you may want to consider tutoring online from established tutors who understand the AP very well and can help fill in the gaps so that your student can get that 5. Because again, if the resources at your school are not such that they can help the student get the 5, then taking the AP class is really not a benefit because you're losing out on the normative aspect of the exams. Students can do that. Just because they're in a bad school, they shouldn't be left behind. Ultimately, just like everything that we talk about in college admissions, it's about the student. The structure and the rigor of the IB program is different. And the AP program is more flexible and offers more choice. Which is better? I don't know. Which is better for your kid? If you have access to both, if you're fortunate enough to live in an area where you have access to both AP and IB options, first of all, count yourself lucky, because there are plenty of places in this country that don't have that choice. And then examine your son or daughter and talk to them about this and help them to understand the curriculum of the IB prefix and the more smorgasbord approach of a la carte advanced placement. Great students can be great in both curricula, but sometimes one is going to suit that student better than the other. So whichever one suits your child best, that's the one you should choose. Don't fret though. If the AP or IB is unavailable to you because you live in a rural area, or you live in a district that does not offer either, or you just can't change schools easily, remind ourselves that your student is judged on the performance in the context in which they are being educated. That the school is the measure of comparison. How well is your student doing within that school? I won't deny that if your school is relatively weak, then the schools will be compared to one another later, and I'll explain that in a different video. But don't worry about this. Worry about your student's performance. If you really don't have a choice, make sure that your student's performance is top-notch. And there may be other opportunities to increase the curricular rigor if the student wants or needs it. And this primarily in most areas is cross-enrollment with community colleges, or options to take courses at college campuses, public universities that are located nearby, or maybe even online. So there are other ways to enrich the curriculum. So don't fret if it's not available. There may be other options for you. And so that brings us a close to this video of the differences between the AP and the IB. I hope this has helped you understand the basic outlines of these two programs and to help you make that choice if you have that choice. If you don't have that choice, again, don't panic. There are other ways to increase the rigor of the curriculum that your student is exposed to so that they can be better prepared for their future. But ultimately, remind ourselves that what we're trying to do during secondary education is to give our kids the best possible education that we can while they are in those years of public education. Or maybe it's private education too, but we want them to take every advantage of the opportunities before them. Some students will have choices, some students will not. But if we really focus on how do we make the best of the opportunities we have in front of us, then we are sure to guide our students in the right way. Thanks very much. I'll see you on the next video.